This is the digital channel of the General Overseas Service of All India Radio. I am Manoj Mainkar, and in the next half hour, I'll bring to you news updates from India and around the world, awareness videos on coronavirus by Government of India, yoga on radio, and a lot more. We'll begin with the news updates.
Namaskar. This is the General Overseas Service of All India Radio. The news snippets, read by Maria Albina Michael. Government holding meetings at the highest level to chalk out plans for the post-3rd May scenario. 1,200 labourers belonging to Jharkhand have departed from Telangana in a special 24-bogie train. All passengers have been provided food, water, masks and sanitizers. In Delhi, 2 areas have exited the containment zone. 76 patients tested positive in the last 24 hours. Brihan Mumbai Municipal Corporation (BMC) asks all staff to join duty immediately. Maharashtra, Karnataka and Telangana governments mulling relaxation in green zones after 4th May. West Bengal has announced some relaxations in green zones from 4th May. Maruti reports zero sales in April 2020. Automakers seek package from the government. South Africa eases lockdown. Schools to reopen but size of classes to be reduced. Maldives reports first death due to COVID-19. Authorities call for strict social distancing in mosques. More than 1 million people have recovered from coronavirus in the world. War of words between US and China continues over the spread of coronavirus. And that is the end of the news snippets.
Radio is an intimate storytelling medium. And when it bonds with one of the finest storytellers of our times, the result is sheer magic. During these times of social distancing, All India Radio hopes to bring you some comfort, some connection, with an exclusive story reading series, Bonding over the Radio. Coming up is the pick of the day, voiced by the author Ruskin Bond himself. The title of the story is
Remember This Day. If you can get an entire year off from school when you are 9 years old and can have a memorable time with a great father, then that year has to be the best time of your life, even if it is followed by sorrow and insecurity. It was the result of my parents' separation at a time when my father was on active service in the RAF during World War II. He managed to keep me with him for a summer and winter at various locations in New Delhi, Haley Road, Atul Grove Lane, Scindia House, in apartments he had rented, as he was not permitted to keep a child in the quarters assigned to active personnel. This arrangement suited me perfectly, and I had a wonderful year in Delhi, going to the cinema, quaffing milkshakes, helping my father with his stamp collection. But this idyllic situation could not continue forever, and when he was transferred to Karachi, he had no option but to put me in a boarding school. This was the Bishop Cotton Preparatory School in Simla, or rather Chota Simla, where boys studied up to class 4, after which they moved on to the senior school. Although I was a shy boy, I had settled down quite well in the friendly atmosphere of this little school. But I did miss my father's companionship, and I was overjoyed when he came up to see me during the midsummer break. He had a couple of days' leave, and he could only take me out for a day, bringing me back to school in the evening. I was so proud of him when he turned up in his dark blue RAF uniform, a flight lieutenant's stripes very much in evidence as he had just been promoted. He was already 40, engaged in codes and ciphers, and not flying much. He was short and stocky, getting bald, but smart in his uniform. I gave him a salute. I loved giving salutes. And he returned the salutation and followed it up with a hug and a kiss on my forehead. "And what would you like to do today, son?" "Let's go to Davico's," I said. Davico's was the best restaurant in town, famous for its meringues, marzipans, curry puffs, and pastries. So to Davico's we went, where, of course, I gorged myself on confectionery, as only a small schoolboy can do. "Lunch is still a long way off," said my father, "so let's go for a walk." And provisioning ourselves with more pastries, we left the mall and trudged up to Monkey Temple at the top of Jacko Hill. Here we were relieved of the pastries by the monkeys, who simply snatched them away from my unwilling hands, and we came downhill in a hurry before I could get hungry again. Small boys and monkeys have much in common. My father suggested a rickshaw ride around Elysium Hill, and this we did in style, swept along by 4 sturdy young rickshaw pullers. My father took the opportunity of relating the story of Kipling's Phantom Rickshaw, just before I discovered it in print. And then we ate at Wenger's. And then, enough of ghost stories, Ruskin. Let's go to the pictures. I loved going to the pictures. I know the Delhi cinemas intimately, and it hadn't taken me long to discover the similar cinemas. There were 3 of them, the Regal, the Ritz, and the Rivoli. We went to the Rivoli. It was down near the ice skating rink and the old Blessington Hotel. The film was about an ice skater, a pretty young Norwegian Olympic champion who appeared in a number of Hollywood musicals. All she had to do was skate and look pretty, and this she did to perfection. I decided to fall in love with her. But by the time I grew up and finished school, she'd stopped skating and making films. Whatever happened to her? After the picture, it was time to return to school. We walked all the way to Chota Simla, talking about what we'd do during the winter holidays and where we would go when the war was over. "I'll be in Calcutta now," said my father. "There are good bookshops there, and cinemas, and restaurants, and we'll buy more gramophone records and add to the stamp collection." It was dusk when we walked slowly down the path to the school gate and playing field. 2 of my friends were waiting for me, Bimal and Riaz. My father spoke to them, asked about their homes, and then a bell started ringing. We had to say goodbye. "You'll remember this day, Ruskin," said my father. He patted me gently on the head and walked away. I never saw him again. 3 months later, I heard that he had passed away in the military hospital in Calcutta. I dream of him sometimes, and in my dream, he is always the same, caring for me and leading me by the hand along old familiar roads. And of course, I remember that day. Over 70 years have passed, but it's as fresh as yesterday.
Can I just ask you a couple of questions, sir?
Yes. Right.
Why you chose to start with a story on your father?
Yes, I'd love to, because my father had a great influence on me when I was a boy. Unfortunately, I lost him when I was 10, and he died rather prematurely. But I spent a lot of time with him, and he was a wonderful father. He used to take me for long walks around Delhi and to the old monuments, tell me stories about them, give me the history. So I used to learn history from him, as well as English, because he'd give me books to read. Although I lost him at a very early age, he had a very strong influence, I think, on my development. And remember this day is a little vignette about his last visit to me when I was at boarding school. But I've also written about him in other stories and in a book called Looking for the Rainbow.
And I remember, sir, a story about your trees growing in Dera, your father's trees growing in Dera.
Oh, that's right. On a visit to Dehradun, it was during the monsoon, and there was this little island in the riverbed, and it was very bare, and so we planted a few trees there. And when I came back years later, after returning from England, they'd grown quite big, and some they were flowering trees too. So it was a moving experience.
And this story was in the collection that got you the Sahitya Academy Award, if I'm not wrong?
Yes, that's true. I forget the year now. It was quite, 20 years back or more.
And the collection was Our Trees or My Father's Trees.
Our Trees Still Grow in Dehra. Yes,
Right.
Our Trees Still Grow in Dehra. And it's still in print, that book, as indeed all my books are. And all my stories, old ones, new ones, they're still around. And of course, I keep writing.
I hope you'll keep reading to us too.
Yeah, oh, certainly.
Well, I'm sure the young listeners are lapping this all up. Sir, what about your memories of being told a story or read a story?
Well, I grew up I learned to read very young, and I was fond of reading, so I don't recall much that I was being told stories. Of course, I would get a lot of information, say, from my father. Like, he collected postage stamps. He had a wonderful collection. So he would tell me the stories behind the stamps, if it was a stamp from New Zealand or Newfoundland or the Canary Islands or Solomon Islands, and he'd tell me something about those places. So in a way, I was learning geography too. So there were stories behind the stamps. So in that way, I was told stories. Otherwise, I read them from an early age. I was a great reader.
One last question from a young listener.
Yes.
He wants to know, how much time do you give to writing every day?
Oh, how much time I give?
Yes.
Well, it can vary, but I try to do something every morning. Not so much from the point of view of time, but, sort of 500 words or 600 words, and that takes, say, 2 or 3 pages of a writing pad. If I want to do more, I'll do more, and if I'm feeling very lazy, I might not do it at all. But normally, I'm quite regular. And have been for, 70 years now, since I started writing.
Lazy and disciplined.
A disciplined, lazy man.
Lovely talking to you, sir. Looking forward to tomorrow's story.
Good.
Will it be a funny one?
Yes, if you like.
We all look forward, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was storyteller par excellence, Ruskin Bond, reading his hand-picked story of the day in our exclusive series, Bonding over the Radio. Hope these stories bring you some comfort, some connection in these times of social distancing. Ruskin Bond needs no introduction. Much loved by generations for his enduring and inspiring writing, he's an iconic and prolific literateur, honoured with the Padma Bhushan and Sahitya Academy Awards. Some of his works that have been adapted for film and television series include Junoon, Susanna's 7 Husbands, Saat Khoon Maaf, The Blue Umbrella, and Ek Tha Rusty. A presentation of the Central English Features Unit. This came to you from the External Services Division of All India Radio. Up in the hills of Missouri, it is quiet. In these days, very quiet. So what is our favorite storyteller, Ruskin Bond, doing in these times of lockdown? Writing, reading, looking out over the deserted roads, and at 12 noon every day, picking up the phone to read us one of his stories? All India Radio is happy to bring you a selection of enduring and endearing tales read by the eminent author Ruskin Bond himself. Every day, beginning 1st May, live streaming on our mobile app, News on Air, channels AIR Live News 24/7, FM Gold Delhi and Indraprasth at 7:10 am and 10:10 pm. Also on the YouTube channel of AIR World Service at 7:30 pm and 9:30 pm. Bonding over the radio.
Now, it's time for today's commentary.
You are with us on the General Overseas Service of All India Radio. We now bring you today's commentary. BRICS strategizes collective response to COVID-19. It is scripted by Rajor Shiroy, analyst on Russia and the CIS, and read by Kaushik Rai. Extraordinary times call for out-of-the-box measures, and in a COVID-19-induced global disruption, this was aptly reflected in the recent BRICS foreign ministers' virtual meeting. The foreign ministers of Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa met with the core objective of strategizing a collective response to the pandemic, which has overwhelmed national health response systems and brought the world to the brink of a recession. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar represented India at the meet. Rebuilding health and wealth was therefore the core focus of the online discussion. The interaction also delved into a post-COVID-19 world order and the role of emerging economies in it, with the foreign ministers re-emphasizing the need for reforming multilateral institutions. The key outcome of the meeting was the decision to allocate $15 billion to set up a special loan instrument that will help reconstruct the ravaged BRICS economies. A virtual BRICS health officials meeting to ideate upon a more effective medical response will be held in the first week of May. However, given the looming threat of a second wave of infection, reversing the tide of the virus in 4 of the 5 BRICS countries appears a Herculean task. Today, 11 years after the first BRICS summit in Yekaterinburg, the wheels have come a full circle, with Russia once again in the driver's seat as president of the group to navigate it through these turbulent times. Representing 42% of the global population, the raison d'etre of BRICS has been to offer a platform to its members to achieve their shared objectives. These include reform of economic governance, primacy of the UN, respect for sovereignty, and establishment of an equitable multipolar world anchored in multilateralism. However, multilateralism is arguably in crisis. The credibility of the UNSC is being increasingly questioned amidst its failure to even discuss the global pandemic. Similarly, the WHO's alleged China-centric bias was seen as undermining the efficacy of its early warning and response systems that could have limited the COVID-19 spread. The simmering resentment against China may even lead to new equations and alignments. Meanwhile, the growing tendency of my country first is challenging the pillars of globalization that have hitherto rested on open borders and interdependent supply chains. With countries progressively looking inwards, a recalibration of multilateralism is likely in the offing. Amidst these churnings, the robust dialogue mechanisms of BRICS can hold it in good stead to collectively tackle the pandemic anchored in health diplomacy. The 2018 BRICS proposal to develop a center for research and development of vaccines is likely to gain traction. The pharmacological prowess of India, Russia and China can aid the process of developing effective and low-cost medicines, including traditional ones. The emphasis on holistic health can receive a boost through yoga. Similarly, the revival of BRICS humanitarian assistance and disaster relief mechanisms can help alleviate future black swan events. In this context, the new development bank of the group is well positioned to fast-track several of these proposals that lie at the frontiers of science and technology. At a time when virtual space has acquired a critical dimension in keeping the wheels of economies rolling, the salience of cybersecurity is profound. Similarly, the global lockdowns which led to nature healing and reclaiming its place have re-emphasized the efficacy of tackling climate change. These issues remain the key focus of BRICS dialogue architecture. Given the political, economic and ideological diversity of BRICS members, as evidenced by Russia and South Africa shielding China at the UNSC despite its COVID-19 acts of commission and omission, the litmus test will lie in BRICS' ability to strengthen mutually beneficial cooperation while setting aside their differences. With the future outlook of COVID-19 pandemic appearing gloomy and uncertain, combining each other's strengths to weather a raging tempest is more relevant than ever before. That was today's commentary entitled BRICS Strategizes Collective Response to COVID-19. It was scripted by Rajor Shiroy, analyst on Russia and the CIS, and read by Kaushik Rai.
Namaste. Greetings to the listeners of the General Overseas Service of ESD All India Radio. I am Pavanjeet and a teacher by profession. I am currently based in Lucknow, the city of Nawabs. Teaching is one profession which keeps one on his or her toes all the time. Being in the company of kids for most of the time, it compels you to behave like one. I love growing up with my students over and over again. Today happens to be the 1st of May, the Labor Day. People from across the globe take to the streets on the 1st of May to commemorate the International Workers' Day or Labor Day. Labor Day has its origins in the labor union movement in the United States. In many countries, it's an official holiday. The day commemorates the 1886 Haymarket Affair in Chicago, which was a workers' struggle against a host of workers' rights violations, including lengthy working hours, poor conditions, and child labor. Thereafter, an 8-hour workday was initiated in the US in 1916. 4 days later, Russia followed suit and introduced the same by an official decree. International Workers' Day is marked by protests, strikes, and commemorations around the world. While the size and intensity of the commemorations have ebbed and flowed, several protests stand out. In the US in 1971, as the Vietnam War continued under the presidency of Richard Nixon, protests in Washington spanned over several days and led to civil disobedience against the war. In India, Labor Day is referred to as the Antarashtriya Shramik Divas. It was first celebrated in 1923 in Chennai by the Labour Kisan Party. It was an outcome of the exploitations suffered by the workers at the hands of the industrialists. The workers were made to work for more than 10 to 15 hours at a stretch without a break. Subsequently, the workers demanded paid leaves, proper wages and working conditions, and breaks in between. This year has been unique in ways more than one. With the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, all celebrations have been put on hold, and the nation is under lockdown. You will agree with me when I say the workers of the country were among the worst hit. Most of them move from villages to work in cities. They accept the job of a driver, a gardener, or as a daily wage worker at a construction site, while some work as street vendors. With their livelihoods grinding to a halt and meager savings running out fast, they decided to return to their villages. But with train and bus services halted and borders sealed, this didn't seem an option. So mass exodus began on foot. The authorities say that the lockdown is the key to saving lives, but its suddenness has hit the country's poorest and the most vulnerable citizens hard. In the absence of work, many migrant workers are dependent on food handouts from governments and charity by other organizations. It has been found that 89% of them have not been paid their wages. With neither food nor cash, migrant workers have been pushed to the brink of starvation and extreme indignity. Lately, efforts are being made by the state governments to bring back their workers. If only the lockdown is converted to the imposition of Section 144 of the Indian Penal Code, which prohibits the gathering of 4 or more people, the jobless Indian workers can see some light at the end of the tunnel. This way, the movement of the people can be allowed and contained at the same time. I wish all the workers a peaceful and hopeful Labour Day. May their woes end soon. On a lighter note, let me tell you about another hue on the canvas of May Day. April showers bring May flowers, as the saying goes. May Day is celebrated on the 1st of May every year. That marks the change in seasons. It hails the onset of spring. In the United Kingdom, May Day is still celebrated in many towns with the crowning of the May Queen. Maypoles may be found in some towns. People dress in the traditional costumes and happily dance around the pole. The dance is a part of a fertility ritual. In 1955, the Catholic Church dedicated 1st of May to Saint Joseph the Worker. Saint Joseph is the patron saint of the workers and craftsmen.
During lockdown in India, many citizens are voluntarily participating in creating awareness and helping the less privileged.
Namaste and greetings to all the listeners of the English World Service of the All India Radio. Let me have the pleasure of introducing myself. I'm Shohar Dode, a fellow at the Royal Asiatic Society of Great Britain and Ireland, a 16-year-old, and author of 3 books, and an occasional opinion journalist and columnist at various national and international newspapers like The Statesman, Voices, The Times of India, online blogs, WION by Z News or The World is One News, and finally Thrive Global by Ariana Huffington. Firstly, I hope that everyone has been doing well during times of pandemic when we have all been barred from the outside world and are bound within the 4 walls of our homes. Human beings are getting acquainted with a new phenomenon completely different to the earlier one. You know, as I would tell, like the Prime Minister of our country stated some days ago during the lockdown announcement that there is a pre-corona period and the post-corona period and the two are entirely different to each other. Let's be thankful for walking from our homes because you know we have got the comforts of our homes and to stay social, keeping social distancing in between through means of virtual communication which have enabled us to connect with the family and friends around the world. In this era, or in this age of globalization and urbanization, a complete standstill, a complete halt on the part of the Mother Earth may have a very drastic effect in the coming days. To think like a mother during times of crisis is what we should all aspire for. To think for a better future, venture for a more vibrant tomorrow, during times of calamities, during times of the pandemic. To be true, I have had plentiful time to author my 4th and 5th book manuscripts lately. When you're writing a particular book or a novel on any particular topic that you've already chosen, you need to have a lot of research on that, going detail to detail, intricately, word by word. And the pandemic gives you a lot of time to do so. Moreover, I got a platform as a podcaster host at Spotify where I have been hosting the Subtle Lyrics on a weekly basis. The Subtle Lyrics is a podcast of poetry and how one can better himself at poetic works. It is meant to convey the poetic message to all of those budding young poets out there who are willing to write a poetry to enhance their creativity during this lockdown phase, during the time when we just cannot step out of our homes, and to convey their messages to the world, to their fellow human beings through the means of poetry, through the means of verses. Furthermore, I recently moderated a session at TED Circles with some of the most gallant and brilliant minds from around India and the world, sharing introspects and insights into the pandemic times. The discussion was invigorating and had received a wide applause from around the world. This is a time when I have been reading lots of books I hadn't got a real opportunity to go through during the last year, although most of my reading books are based on art and culture, history and mythology, etc. Necessarily, myself being an avid traveler, yes, everything's got its darker side of the coin, you know. I'm bored and that makes me sad, as everyone else does. Apart from all of these activities of mine, I've been constantly keeping a watch on the numbers as they're rising higher, taking leaps and bounds each day around the world, around every country of the world. But I feel that numbers soon stop to increase in this way that is going through in the last few weeks. We hope that the crisis soon ceases. For the pandemic, I would like to state a line from Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, which says, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. Stay home, stay safe, stay creative. Thank you."
This broadcast came to you from the digital channel of the General Overseas Service of All India Radio.